The jump. Ethan stood at the edge of the diving board, staring down at the water. It wasn't that high, maybe 3 meters, but it felt like a mountain. His feet curled around the edge, gripping tightly, as if they could stop him from falling. "Jump!" someone called from below. He knew he had to. He had promised himself, but his body refused. He wasn't really afraid of water. He wasn't afraid of swimming. He was afraid of the feeling, falling, losing control, not knowing what would happen when he hit the surface. And this wasn't just about the pool. It was about his whole life. For years, Ethan had played it safe. He had a decent job, a decent apartment, a decent life. But something was missing. He had ideas, dreams, things he wanted to do, places he wanted to see. Yet, every time he stood at the edge of something new, something exciting, he did the same thing. He hesitated. He waited. He let fear win. But today, he was tired of waiting. A little boy ran up the steps behind him, impatient. "Are you going to jump or not?" Ethan exhaled. His heart pounded. Then, before he could think, before fear could stop him, he bent his knees and pushed off. For a second, he was flying. Then, splash, the water swallowed him, cool and clean. He surfaced, gasping, laughing. It wasn't perfect. He had belly flopped a little. His eyes stung. But he had done it. And suddenly he knew if he could do this, maybe he could do other things too. Maybe it was time to stop hesitating. Maybe it was time to jump. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the moment. The jump, the fear, the rush, the laughter. It had been such a small thing. Just a dive. But it felt like something had cracked open inside him. He sat up in bed, turned on the lamp, and grabbed an old notebook from his nightstand. On the first page, he wrote, "Things I want to do, but am too scared to." He hesitated for a second, then started listing. Travel alone, speak in front of a crowd, start my own business, say what I really think, learn to dance, try stand-up comedy. He stared at the list. Some things seemed impossible. Others just felt embarrassing. But weren't they all just like the diving board? The fear wasn't real. It was only there until he jumped. The next morning, he looked at the list again. One thing stood out. Travel alone. He had always wanted to. He had dreamed of sitting in a tiny cafe in Paris, hiking through misty mountains, standing on a beach with no one else around. But he had never done it, because it was always too expensive or too complicated. Lies. He picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. Then, just like at the pool, before fear could stop him, he booked a flight. 1 week from now. No plan. No safety net. Just him, a backpack, and a one-way ticket. He put down the phone, heart racing. It was happening. He was jumping again. The airport was louder than Ethan expected. People rushed past him, rolling suitcases and talking on phones. His own bag felt heavier than it should, maybe because it carried more than just clothes. It carried his fear, his excitement, his new beginning. He had almost canceled. Twice. His mind had whispered excuses. What if I get lost? What if I hate it? What if I can't do this? But then He thought of the diving board. So here he was, standing at gate 23, holding a passport that suddenly felt like a magic ticket. "First time traveling alone?" the woman at check-in asked, smiling. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." She handed him his boarding pass. "You're gonna love it." He wasn't sure if that was true, but he wanted it to be. On the plane, he stared out the window as the city below shrank into tiny lights. He wasn't just leaving home. He was leaving behind his old fears, his old excuses. Somewhere over the ocean, he opened his notebook and crossed out the first thing on his list. Travel alone. It felt good, and for the first time in a long time, he couldn't wait to see what happened next. Ethan arrived in Lisbon at sunrise. The air smelled like fresh bread and sea salt. The streets were narrow, the buildings colorful, and everything felt different, exciting. He had no strict plans, just a list of places he wanted to see. But almost immediately, things didn't go as expected. First, he got lost. Not the fun, let's explore kind of lost. The where am I? Why don't I speak Portuguese? My phone is at 2% kind of lost. Then he tried ordering breakfast and accidentally pointed at something he thought was an omelet. It was, in fact, a plate of cold octopus. And finally, while taking a cool travel photo, he stepped in a deep puddle. His shoes were soaked for hours. By noon, Ethan felt ridiculous. Maybe I'm not made for this. He sat on a bench, frustrated, watching the city move around him. People laughed in cafes. An old man played guitar on the street, and children chased pigeons. No one seemed to care that he was lost, wet, and feeling sorry for himself. Then he remembered something. Back home, his fear had always told him, you have to be perfect. You have to know everything before you start. But was that true? He looked around. Lisbon wasn't perfect either. Paint peeled from old buildings. Streets twisted and turned in confusing ways. But that's what made it beautiful. Maybe he didn't need to know everything. Maybe he just needed to enjoy the adventure. Ethan stood up, shook the water from his shoe, and walked on. This time, he let himself get lost on purpose. By evening, Ethan found himself on a rooftop cafe, watching the sun melt into the city. His feet ached from walking, but he felt lighter. He had spent the afternoon wandering. No map, no pressure. He let curiosity guide him. He had found a tiny bookstore where the owner gave him a free postcard. A street artist had drawn his portrait in 5 minutes, laughing the whole time. And he had tried a pastry called pastel de nata, which tasted like happiness in a bite. Now, sitting with a cup of coffee, he realized something. Nothing had gone as planned, and yet it had been perfect. A woman sitting nearby must have noticed his relaxed smile. "First time in Lisbon?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said. "First time traveling alone." She nodded. "Scary at first?" "Very." She stirred her tea. "You know, I used to think confidence meant knowing everything. But it doesn't. It just means trusting yourself, knowing you'll figure things out as you go." Ethan thought about that. He had hesitated at the diving board. He had hesitated before booking his ticket. But now, sitting here, he didn't feel like someone who hesitated anymore. He felt like someone who jumped. Ethan woke up early on his last day in Lisbon. Instead of rushing to see more sights, he decided to do something different. He found a quiet park, sat on a bench, and opened his notebook. He looked at his list. Travel alone. One fear, gone. One dream, lived. But there were still more things waiting. Speak in front of a crowd. Start my own business. Try stand-up comedy. Ethan smiled. A week ago, those dreams had felt impossible. Now, they felt like doors waiting to be opened. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, "The next jump." Maybe he didn't have to know exactly what came next. Maybe he just had to trust himself, like he had on the diving board, like he had in Lisbon. He took a deep breath, closed his notebook, and stood up. A new adventure was waiting, and he was ready to jump. Here, there is no end.